Hi, I'm Chelsea with the Autism Program,
Hey guys, I'm Courtney from the Autism Program as well.
and we're from Health West, and we are going to have a discussion today on challenging behaviors. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to type them into the chat, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation.
All right, so first we're going to look at understanding behavior. And what that means is we have to figure out the why behind the behavior. So why do we do what we do? And then once we can identify this, we can start to look at the different triggers, which are called the antecedents. Antecedents is just a fancy term for what happens prior to the behavior. And then we can look at the consequences, which is what happens after a behavior or what is maintaining that behavior.
So the first thing we're going to look at is the antecedent or the trigger. So it's important to look at a couple different factors, the who, what, where, and when of a situation. So it's important to kind of take note about who is around when a child starts engaging in certain behaviors. Sometimes there can be a trigger person where a behavior happens a little bit more frequently if they're around. Another thing you want to look at is the what. So are there certain activities that are going on when a child becomes a little bit more agitated and engages in some more behaviors? Or is there maybe a demand that's placed on them, like cleaning their room or getting dressed? That can also be something that heightens a behavior. Where it occurs, so the setting in which this happens. Does this happen a little bit more frequently at home? Does it happen more frequently at school or while you're out in the community? And taking note of all of those things can kind of help you have a little bit more understanding of what needs to be adapted in order to have less behavior. And the last one is, when does this behavior occur? So does this happen a little bit more in the evening or in the mornings? Or does this happen a little bit more after a certain event, like a play date or leaving a certain person's house? One of the other things that you can look at is the setting events. Those can also influence behavior. So if your kiddo is upset, or if they're hungry, they don't feel very well, if something hurts, all of that stuff can impact behavior as well. And looking at other events such as changes in routine. Obviously, with everything going on right now with COVID and school getting out early, siblings all being in the same area, close quarters for long periods of time, that can influence behavior as well. So looking at all of that as well can kind of give you an idea of what's causing that behavior.
Okay, and the consequences. So we mentioned earlier that is simply what occurs following the behavior. Don't think of a consequence as a negative thing. It's just what is happening right after. This could be something that the child is getting, such as attention, or it's something that the child could be avoiding. So maybe they're trying to avoid a demand that's been placed on them by engaging in these behaviors.
So when we're looking at behavior, there's a couple different functions that we look at. The first one is escape behavior. So this is something that a child is going to engage in order to get out of doing something. So a task demand. So if you're going to tell your kid to clean their room, they might start engaging in that behavior to try and get out of having to clean their room. The other one is an attention-seeking behavior. This they're doing in order to gain some sort of attention, whether that be good or bad. Attention is attention. A tangible behavior is going to be a behavior that they engage in order to gain something. So whether that be something tangible like a toy or a snack, a drink, that's the reason for that behavior. And the other one is a sensory behavior. So this is going to be a behavior that they engage in because it feels good and it's just automatically reinforcing just because it's reinforcing.
All right, so how we figure out the function is by simply observing the behavior. So what we want to do is watch the child with objective eyes. So try to be an outsider and just looking at the facts and stating the facts and not trying to assume anything that's going on. Try to think of it as, observing things that other people could also observe and be in agreement. So there's nothing more valuable than the observation of a well-informed parent. So this is something that you guys can definitely do at home, and we do the same exact thing. So also keep in mind the things that are going on around the child in their environment. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's coming from another person. It could be things going on in the environment. So we are going to practice together. We're going to watch a short video clip and see if we can identify the function of the behavior by looking at some of the antecedents and consequences. I will be pausing it throughout, and we'll be analyzing it together. So here we go. Oops, pause. Okay, Chelsea, can you see my video?
I can.
Yes, okay. Let's start this over. Okay, so before we get too far into this, let's just try to think of some things that we can observe with our objective eyes, maybe some things in the environment or what this child is doing.
So the first thing that I see is a little boy playing by himself. He's surrounded by blocks, and then every once in a while it looks like he's looking at someone who I assume is holding a camera.
Okay, good. Let's play some more. Anything else you can add there?
Looks like he's starting to move toward a noise.
Okay. Okay, what just happened there?
He started sticking out his tongue and making blowing noises.
Good. I agree. What could you say about the other kids in the environment?
The other kids seem to be playing together.
Okay. All right, did you catch that?
Yes. So he came up, hit the other kid, and then looked at, I assume, the adult who's holding the camera.
Okay. And what was the behavior of the other little boy?
He ignored it.
Okay. That was fast, but what happened?
So the little boy in the red ended up scratching the little boy in the gray sweatshirt, which then prompted the little boy in the gray sweatshirt to yell and turn around.
Okay, what could you say is happening now?
The little boy yelled at him, so the little boy in the red turned his back and looks like he is no longer willing to engage with the other children.
Okay, good, good, good. Okay, I'm gonna go back to our PowerPoint. Okay, good. So some of the antecedents that Chelsea mentioned where he was alone in the environment, looked like he was playing with some toys. Chelsea, do you have an idea of what the function may be of his challenging behavior of hitting the other kids?
I would say that it is probably attention seeking.
Okay, I would agree with you. So he was by himself, didn't, at least from what we could observe, he wasn't receiving any attention from anybody else. So he oriented towards the other kids, and the first thing he did was kind of the swat or the hit, and he didn't get a response from the little boy. He did look what looked like he looked at the camera person, and then he didn't really get a reaction, so he went in for the scratch, and that is what got the reaction or the attention. And like Chelsea mentioned earlier, it's not always positive attention negative attention can give them that same function. So good work, Chelsea.
Thanks.
All right, so we are going to start talking about some prevention strategies, so different ways that we can rearrange the environment so that we can prevent some of these challenging behaviors. So what we can ask ourselves is, what could I change about the situation that would increase the opportunity for my child to behave better? So some prevention strategies we're going to talk about today are avoiding and improving difficult situations, providing choices for our children, and then prompting positive behaviors. So if we have a child that is disruptive in certain places or during certain activities, or even with particular people, if these situations are unnecessary, try to avoid them. And we know that you can't avoid everything. You have to go to the grocery store. Eventually, you have to go to doctor's appointments. So we're just talking about things that we can avoid. So for example, if we know that our kids are disruptive when the grocery store is particularly busy, maybe we don't go on a Sunday afternoon when everybody and their brother are there. Maybe we can, that's something we can control, and we can schedule our grocery shopping maybe on, I don't know, a Monday afternoon. Another example might be if we have a child that is disruptive when we serve certain foods, or maybe that's when we see some of those challenging behaviors. If that is avoidable, maybe give them other options. If we have, if it's an environment that is being interrupted, or like right now, changes in routine, that's a big one right now. If we can try to keep some of their schedule as consistent as possible, that is going to be a way we can avoid some of those difficult situations. So I know that's tough right now, but even if we can find one or two things throughout the day that we can keep consistent, this is going to be helpful in avoiding some of those typical triggers with those transitions. So also keeping in mind some of those physical factors that we talked about, so sickness, being hungry, maybe tiredness. We know that these are things that affect our behavior, and that's everyone's behavior. I definitely act different when I am hungry. I turn hangry. So maybe we don't ask our child as soon as they get home from school to go pick up their toys or clean their room. Maybe we give them some of that downtime before we place that demand. Maybe we give them a snack before we tell them to do their homework. If we know that maybe they haven't eaten lunch since 11 o'clock and dinner's not ready. If we have an attention-seeking behavior, it's important to be able to provide a great deal of unconditional attention throughout the day. So, really trying to, we call it catch them being good. And even if these are just little things that we can find throughout the day, that they are doing well and appropriately, just giving them some of that behavior-specific praise when we can. And some ways we can improve difficult situations: if we have some challenging behavior that only occurs during particular activities, we can try to change some of those troublesome parts of the activities, and we just want to create a more positive experience. So things we can do, just for example of using the task of cleaning your room, we can make it fun, maybe turn it into a game, maybe include a sibling, add some music. Maybe we have to make the task a little bit easier. So the task of cleaning your room is pretty complex. It includes a lot of steps. So really breaking that down, and maybe first they have to put their Legos away. And then once they put their Legos away, we can praise them for that, and they've reached some success, and okay, now it's time to make your bed. So just breaking that large task down into simpler steps. If we have a child that misbehaves for attention, one way that we can improve a difficult situation is give them something fun to do while they're waiting. So this could be a toy, a book, or nowadays I feel like a tablet is pretty popular. If we have to interrupt a favorite activity, and this is when we see some of this challenging behavior occur, we can always add an activity that's fun or try to involve the child directly. So maybe, you know, they're in charge of putting away the game, or they're in charge of turning off the TV. So just including them in on that process of the transition can improve that situation. And keep in mind that we do want to inform the child of when they can have those activities available again, so that they don't feel like we're taking these things away, you know, indefinitely. So telling them, okay, it's time to put this away, but you can have it back after dinner, and just trying to be as concrete as possible, because saying you can have this again in a little while, you know, we don't know what that means, and they don't know what that means. So maybe it's after dinner, maybe it's after you take a bath. Just trying to be as concrete as possible. All right. So another thing that we can do is provide choices for our kids. I think this is very important because I think a lot of times we get used to just telling our kids what to do. So if we can provide some of those opportunities for them to make their own choices, it can actually build some independent skills, foster good decision making, and it can help in reducing some of these challenging behaviors as well. So just some examples of some choices that your children can make: what toys they want to play with, how they want to organize their belongings, right? You don't care whether, you know, the toys are in a blue bin or a red bin, they're just put away. So maybe they get to choose how they organize those things. The order of activities for the day. So if you know in a given day you have errands to run, and maybe you have to go to the grocery store and you have to go to the post office, maybe they get to choose where they want to go first. Their clothing options. So maybe providing a couple outfits that they get to choose from, and ultimately you are making the choice, but to them it feels like they're making the choice because maybe they get to choose 1 out of 2 or 3 clothing options. They could choose what snack they would like from a couple different options that you give them. So, you know, if they ask you for a cookie and you say no, that could bring about some challenging behavior. So trying to avoid that, maybe we're 2 steps ahead and we give them 2 options. Would you like some chips or a cheese stick? And they get to choose. And then also giving them the ability to say no once in a while, because we also don't want to build yes robots, because that can cause some safety concerns as well. So when there is an opportunity and it's okay for them to say no to something, giving them that choice. All right, we touched a little bit about how we want to prompt good or positive behavior. And one way we can do that is by giving them explanations about what is expected in certain situations. So our kids a lot of time require some of this extra help to show them how to behave at these certain places. So for example, if you need to go somewhere where they need to use their inside voice, this is something that you might have to practice with them, maybe in the car ride or in the car as soon as you park before you go inside. You know, have that talk and explain what an inside voice is, model for them what it looks like, have them practice, have them show you, and give them some feedback on their inside voice. And then once you get inside, just, you know, I'm sure they will still require some prompts to use that inside voice when they're actually in the situation. So you might have to use some verbal prompts, some reminders. You can also use different like picture cards that they know means quiet that you could simply hold up for them. Sometimes, you know, just the gesture of like your finger over your lips can work, as long as they know what that means through practice. And then again, providing that unconditional behavior specific praise when that positive behavior is occurring. So going back to that video that we played earlier, where it started out when he was by himself playing. You know, we don't know, but the hope is that if we would have provided him with some sort of attention in that moment when he was playing, that maybe he wouldn't have needed to seek that out in a more negative way towards his peers. So, Chelsea, do you have any maybe examples of some behavior-specific praise we could have given him?
We could have, when he was playing independently, said, I like the way you're playing with that truck. I like the way that you're being quiet.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. And that kind of gives them that fill that he might need of attention, so that he might have to, you know, not go seek that out in a negative way. Good. All right. So predictability. This is big for our kids. A lot of our kids have a hard time, you know, not knowing what's coming next, different transitions, change in routine. So if we can provide some predictability, we can definitely avoid some of those challenging behaviors. So predictability simply means that we're giving the child expectations of their behavior prior to the event. So this is kind of giving them like a heads up. So we want to be able to clearly tell them where they are going, who will be there, how long you're going to stay, if you know that, and exactly how you expect them to behave. So for an example, we are going to Grandma's house. Aunt Linda's going to be there. We're going to stay we're leaving right after dinner. And I expect you to sit in your chair the entire time we're eating, have an inside voice, so on and so forth. Because we don't want to assume that they know how we want them to behave. I think that's easy to do as a parent, is kind of say, well, they know better, they know how to act. We don't always want to assume that. So as much predictability as we can give them, better. And another way that we can communicate our expectations is through something called social stories. So we're going to go through a couple examples here. So this is an example of if we have a young man who is possibly going through puberty, he's having some changes go on with his body, so it tells him exactly what's going on and what's expected of him. And this is in first person, so this is something that he could read himself, or it can be read to him depending on his skill level. So it just says, I'm a young man, I'm growing up. And then it goes into what's happening to his body. So sometimes my underarms will sweat and feel wet. Sometimes they will smell bad. And then it goes into what's expected of him. So now he needs to wash with soap and water every day. He must wear deodorant. And this one has a lot of pictures and not a lot of words. So depending on what the skill level is of the child, we can kind of tweak these. And here's an example of one that's much more wordy, with less pictures. So here they're talking about voice volume. So what is a loud versus quiet voice, and when and where you can use each type of voice. So in order to, you know, we would give this social story to a child that definitely has the attending skills and that could sit and listen to the story. All right. Schedules, these can definitely help clarify upcoming events and activities and give our kids some predictability. These can be written schedules, these can be visual schedules with pictures. It just depends on the child and what works. And these are very useful when our child has difficulty with too much verbal explanations, you know, so these long, wordy explanations, trying to give them all this information. If they have difficulty with that, maybe a visual schedule would work better. If we have kids that get anxious with routine changes, another useful thing is a schedule for them as well. So we'll go through a couple examples of these. So one of these breaks down the day, and this one's very broad, but it breaks down the day into morning, afternoon, and evening, and it just gives that expectation of what they need to do in the morning. So I need to brush my teeth, comb my hair, get dressed, eat breakfast, and then I get my backpack before going to school. and then into the afternoon and the evening. And this can definitely be individualized for what your schedule looks like in the morning, afternoon, and evening. And this can also be tweaked so that these pictures could be removable, so you could switch things around. Maybe the child gets to move the picture after they've completed something. Can definitely look a little bit different for each child. On the other side, we have, so they took a part of the day, which is bedtime, and broke down the routine so that they can see, the child can see exactly what's expected of them before they go to bed. So they take a bath, then they put on their pajamas, comb their hair, brush their teeth, read a book, and then they go to bed. And this is nice too, so you don't have to sit and tell them verbally what's going to happen throughout the day. You can kind of revert back to the schedule and tell them, well, go look at your schedule. Kind of take some of that work off of you guys as caregivers. Here's a couple more examples of some schedules. So the shower routine could be something that is laminated, maybe hung up in your shower, and it has little boxes underneath each step, so the child could possibly check off after they've completed each step. And it breaks down showering, which is a complex skill, into each step, so they can look, okay, I got my hair wet, what do I need to do next? Okay, I put shampoo in my hair, now I need to rinse it. And if they can check it off, kind of gives them that sense of completion and hopefully some pride. On the other side, we've got getting dressed, again another complex skill, so it breaks down each step. So maybe this is something you hang in their bedroom and they can look at, so you don't have to be in the bedroom with them, and reminding them of each step gives them a little bit more independence as well. All right, and the last way that we can provide some predictability is by the use of verbal cues, letting them know when an activity is going to end. So a lot of times we use timers, and this is just a visual representation so they know when something is about to end. So you could set the timer. Sometimes kids like to press start. You could set it in front of them if they like to see the countdown. And this just gives them some predictability of when something's going to end and what's going to happen next. So for example, we're almost done. I'm going to set my timer for 5 minutes, and when it goes off, it'll be time to clean up. And this is not something that is magical and works after the first time. This is something that you'll have to use consistently so that they start to learn. Once the timer goes off, it's time to transition into this next activity, clean up the toys, whatever it may be. Another example, we have to go see grandma. I'm going to set my timer for 3 minutes, and once the timer goes off, we will leave. Just an extra tip too, try to stick with small increments of time. I would say no more than 15 minutes, especially for young kids. And if you do set a timer for 10, 15 minutes, try to give some reminders as the time decreases. So you might have to give them reminders at 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute, sometimes even down to the seconds. All right, so next we're going to talk about how we can replace some of these challenging behaviors with some skills that we can teach our kids, because a lot of times they do lack the appropriate and effective skills to handle certain situations that may be difficult, or if they are trying to escape a demand, or they want something, they want that tangible. A lot of times just their way of communicating to us that they want or need something, or they want something to stop. So what we want to do is try to teach them more appropriate skills that they can still get the things that they want or avoid the things that they don't. So some important questions that can help us identify some specific replacement behaviors are, what else can my child do to either get what they need, or to avoid or delay a difficult situation, or to effectively handle some circumstances more appropriately? It's important to identify positive skills too, to replace these problem behaviors, and keep in mind that yes, problem behavior can be very frustrating, but we have to realize that there is a purpose. So it goes back to that function of behavior that Chelsea talked about earlier. There is a function to all behaviors. There is a reason, there's a why behind every behavior. We just have to be detectives and try to figure out what they're trying to communicate to us. So just some examples, and these are very broad examples. Again, these would be individualized based on the child. But some replacement behaviors can be teaching our kids to request specific items or activities or types of interactions or attention even. And this can be verbally requesting. This can be using pictures to request as well, just depending on the skill of the child. So for example, asking, can I have my tablet? Instead of engaging in some of those challenging behaviors. I want a snack, please, instead of engaging in some of those challenging behaviors as well. If the child misbehaves when they are uncomfortable or upset, we can work on teaching them how to address their own needs in the moment. So sometimes we can teach deep breathing when they're starting to get agitated or anxious in a certain situation. And then we can try to teach them some of that independence, like getting their own drink when they become thirsty, or getting a snack when they are feeling hungry, if that is something that's available. If our child has difficulty in doing certain activities, we can prompt them to ask for help, and that might be something that we have to model for them. Help, please. That's a big one. So when they're doing a difficult activity and they're getting frustrated, it's okay to jump in and model help please, and hopefully they can imitate you, and that would be a great time for you to jump in and give them that help, and really praising that behavior of asking for help. We could teach them to request a break as well. If there's certain situations where they do get a little bit agitated or anxious, and this could be, like I said, verbally asking for a break, or this might be just a little picture card that they've learned means break that they could hold up or point to, and it's okay. That's appropriate for them to ask for a break, and we want to be able to give that to them as long as we can bring them back and have them complete the activity when they're ready. If our child responds negatively to having to give up some of those preferred items or toys, we can teach them how to appropriately ask for things back. We can model for them how to take turns and share, maybe with us or siblings, or we could have them put the items away themselves. So we talked about that earlier, kind of giving them that little bit sense of control. We do want to make sure that the replacement skill is developmentally appropriate, so we're not going to have a child who is nonverbal say, Mom, can I please have a snack, please, right? So it might be a picture that they give us. So just making sure that it is appropriate for their skill level. And we might have to begin in the beginning when we're teaching these skills, we might have to simplify them. So maybe at first we only require that they point to the pantry when they want a snack. Maybe we start small, and then we would, try to shape that into maybe then asking for just snack, and then maybe I want a snack, please, into a full sentence. So just remember, beginning small, that's totally fine. You have to start somewhere. The whole goal is we want to help the child reach success and then praise the behavior in the moment. So even if they're pointing, and that's better than engaging in challenging behavior. So really praising that positive behavior. All right, does anybody have any questions, comments?
There aren't any questions at this point, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoy the sunshine. It's beautiful outside today.